Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending today. My name is Rebekah Covington, and I'm the Corporate Relations Coordinator at Businesses Ending Slavery and Trafficking. And today's webinar, the purpose of it is to educate the community about how we can join with local leaders to help empower LGBTQ2IA plus individuals who have experienced trafficking, and to address common stigmas and myths surrounding male victims and survivors and LGBTQ youth. So to provide a brief overview of this event, I'll be speaking with local leaders Erik Gray and Viserys. This will be more of a conversational event. I think we've all been in so many webinars recently, so we're going to have the ability just to discuss different topics and have some local leaders provide their expertise today. I'll be giving a brief overview of BEST and the work that we do. And if the audience has any questions, feel free to place them in the comments box and I'll get to them the best I can. If I'm not able to get to all of your questions, feel free to email me at the end of this Lunch and Learn at rebecca@bestalliance.org. So many of you may not have heard about BEST and the work that we do. So we started in 2012, and the goal was to really fill the gap for education and awareness in the private sector. So we started working in the hospitality industry because we know that many people who have been trafficked out of hotels. So training hotel staff was, very crucial to this work. We then moved to having and creating a legal education for lawyers to help survivors and victims of trafficking. We created a best basics training that transportation or anyone in the community can take to really learn about human trafficking, the identifiers, indicators, to be able to help someone and properly respond. And so from there, we created a Ports to Freedom and a Flights to Freedom for aviation and maritime. So we have a human trafficking training that's industry specific, that trains in these same things, the indicators to make sure someone properly is able to respond and help people get out of a trafficking situation. And through that work, we were able to create the Safe Jobs Collaborative. Many of you may have heard of the work that we do throughout King County. So what we do is we act as a bridge between social service agencies and the businesses in our community. And we're able to help provide sustainable employment opportunities for survivors of trafficking, at-risk youth, and opportunity youth. So this has been great work. We've partnered with 23 or more great businesses in the community to provide employment for the population that we serve. And so a little bit about why this work is so important to me personally. Growing up as a youth, I was trafficked over the course of 2 years over multiple state lines. And so going through that experience and being able to get out of that life, I didn't have access to all of the resources, all of the education, the housing, employment opportunities that we have now within our community. And so it's so awesome to be able to now work for an organization that not only does educate the public to be able to help someone, like me. There was many times I was in a healthcare facility where if someone was trained properly, I could have possibly gotten the help that I needed. Or, in a hotel, if staff would have known the indicators, they could have asked if I needed help. And so even in our safe jobs work, being able to work with businesses and make them second chance employers to provide employment and to look at these resumes that they might otherwise place to the side. So it's been a really awesome ride working for BEST. And I'm glad to be here today. I want to introduce to you some amazing speakers that we have in this discussion today. First, we have Erik Gray. So he is the first male advocate in Washington State intentionally serving all genders, and is currently serving as a victim advocate with the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. He is co-founder of Queers Uniting to End Exploitation and transnational community organizer centering human trafficking, housing instability, and anti-oppression work for the past decade. Erik recently championed gender and LGBTQ2IA+ inclusion for commercial sexual exploitation services in King County, and has received numerous awards celebrating his ongoing achievements, including the 2021 National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's Hero Award. Welcome, Erik.
Thank you, Rebekah.
We also have Viserys, and he is a survivor advocate, currently working at Rest as a survivor engagement specialist. Growing up in Harlem, Viserys experienced a lot of difficult trauma at an early age that led him to the streets and later into the sex trade. Today, he is using these experiences to advocate and empower male survivors in order to see real change. Welcome.
Everybody.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, I'm excited to have a conversation with some experts in the field. So I want to start off by just asking you a little bit about the work that you do in the community and why this work is so important to you.
Sure.
Well, I am currently the first male survivor engagement here at Rest. We're speaking of sex trade. Rest offers a whole bunch of services. It exists to provide pathways to freedom, services for anyone that has experienced in sex trade. We have job services, advocates for housing services, health clinics that mental health care and things of that nature. We're at Rest Academy that's built to rehabilitate you into the square world or give you some of that knowledge that you didn't have or regain the knowledge that you might have lost or forgot about. Housing assistance and things of that nature. And I am just here to put a face to male survivors because I feel like we are very much dead in the nonprofit world. People don't know that we exist or they don't know how to help us and how to advocate for us. And there's not a lot of male advocates out here that can possibly give men the help they need. And as a survivor myself, I remember growing up at a young age and not being able to have anyone, not being able to have some place that I can go to be heard or to be validated, and that kind of always made me angry, And as I got older, I see that it hasn't changed at all. So my goal is to probably find some services or make some connections with people and outsource to try to get men heard because we are here. And I'm passionate because, I've been through this and I saw firsthand of the effect that it had on me and my peers and the effect that it's still having on young men to this day. And there's just there's not a lot being done about it. And so I just want to be a help to that and spread awareness for that and see if I can possibly change that as much as I possibly can with the help of others.
Absolutely. That is the good word right there. My name's Erik Gray. I use they and he pronouns. I was trafficked at the age of 14 out of the states of Washington, Oregon, and Nevada. Those are RICO violations, crossing state lines, making additional felonies on those cases. Very similar to Viserys. I long for the day when little Erik and a youth today can reach out and say, I want to leave. I don't want to do this anymore. And that those services would be made available, be readily available, offered, and accessible. Early on in my trafficking experience, part of my grooming experience was the implementation of narcotic restraints, meaning that my trafficker groomed me to exploit me through the use of narcotics. And I can't tell you how many times I reached out for help, how many times I begged for treatment, begged for a way out, and how those I wasn't met with the co-occurrence of trafficking and substance use, or how I wasn't met with belief in any way that trafficking could occur in a body like mine, with a face like mine. And that hasn't changed, just like Viserys said, that hasn't changed today. So I think that we all have this belief that you can call 911 and that your sons, nephews, and children will be responded to in a way that accesses justice, and that's just not true. So I'm here today to do the work that I do, and all the different platforms that I do it in, whether it be through my work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, my work with the Federal Office of Trafficking in Persons and their Technical Assistance Center, or otherwise. The moment where Viserys was talking to you from Rest, the place that I used to work, that's the moment I'm here for. I'm here for that moment of passing the baton. I'm here because people came before me to put me here in this place of rise and thrive, so that my brothers, sisters, and siblings who are currently being exploited, who don't have an option, who have to turn a date to take a shower today, won't have to do that anymore.
Absolutely. And that's why this work is so important. You know, we continuously need to build up leaders, you know, women, men, people from diverse backgrounds, and everyone's exit can look completely different. You know, I know mine has, and I'm sure both of yours has too. Regarding your experiences, I know that Best recently updated our trainings to train port leaders, hotel leaders, security officers, and human trafficking training. And I think so many people have this preconceived motion or notion about what trafficking looks like. In your mind, what could have changed those experiences if someone that you came across had that education?
It would have definitely made them more compassionate, for starters. It would have definitely gave them more of a knowledge of how to deal with me and how to handle me. I feel like okay, so it's really, really hard for men, right, in the sex trade, right? Because we are looked at as, we're supposed to be our own protectors, and if you're a man of color, it's even worse. You look like an idiot if you go to the police office and say, "Hey, I was assaulted," or "Hey, I've been raped," or "Hey, I need help," and they look at you like, "Okay, well, you're in this work and you probably deserve it," or you asked for it, right? And so there's no one to sit there and tell us like, hey, like, you're validated and I understand where you're coming from. We kind of just look like, we're stuck and there's no one to talk to. They don't know how to deal with this. They don't know how to deal with our trauma. Worse, if it's a woman who's looking at a man who is escalated now. And now I'm a big Black man who's walking into a place saying, hey, I need help. And I'm frazzled and I'm angry and I'm upset. And no one knows how to calm me down. They kind of turn me away. There's no services for me. Whereas if I was a female, there's so much more empathy for them. And with us, there's no way to acknowledge us. They don't know how to acknowledge us. So if there was some training on how to be empathetic or how to deal with trauma within men, or how even to de-escalate us, or even if there were services that they could probably transfer us to, like, hey, I can help you, but I know someone who can help you. There's not really even that. And it wasn't that back then. So if that was a thing back then, it would have made it much easier for me to come forward and feel like I'm less of a piece of trash, right? Because that's all you feel like when you walk into a place and there's no one to help you. You walk out feeling defeated, and now you're back into the world, and you're back into doing the thing that got you there in the first place without any kind of help or direction, and it sucks.
I think to play off of that, I would have been seen if it was different. Yes, I believe I was overlooked. And if there was training that taught on identification and response for male survivors, I believe I would have been seen, because that's what the training does. It increases your ability to see. So if I was seen, I feel like from hotel worker to social worker to judge, you can meet me in the challenge, not with the solution. So trafficking is very intersectional, like Viserys was talking about, with those intersectional identities. For myself as well as an Indigenous queer person, trafficking is intersectional for me. And solutions are finite. They are reactive to a specific problem. One solution does not fix all problems. And that's the problem with trafficking, approaching trafficking from a savior or I'm going to save you mentality. To save someone, you must have a solution to a problem. And trafficking is an intersectional problem with many different solutions. And so as we enter into the conversation of, well, how was I overlooked? And if there's a preconceived idea of a trafficking victim, absolutely I was overlooked. I was overlooked by all the hotel workers from every hotel I would walk into many times of the month at many nights. Every single time, I was not stopped one time. I was overlooked by the law enforcement officer who let me go with a trick in the middle of the night at age 14 across the street from the mini golf place that I used to go to with my friends in junior high and their families. I was overlooked by the social worker who came to my house and didn't see a trafficking survivor. She saw an overly promiscuous young man. I was majorly overlooked. And at 14, we don't have the words to advocate for ourselves. We don't have the concepts to understand and to name the harms being done against us. That's why we're children. We're children, and we are in the custody of others because they're stewards of our safety and well-being. And I think as a community, as a steward of our current children's safety and well-being and our adult safety and well-being, we have a duty to make this inclusive for all.
And another thing is about the promiscuous thing, because we're gay men or whatever, we're of the LGBTQ community, right? When we go to people and tell them these stories about that, what's happening with us and why we are doing this work, and hey, I'm into it because I was forced into this work, right? I was molested by someone close to me, and that's all I knew. That's all I knew I was worth, right? It's just to have sex, and that's what I consider myself as. And when you are hurt and something like that does happen, and you do want to get out, or you go to someone and say, hey, this is what I've been doing to get by, they look at you like you're just a whore, or like you're overly promiscuous young gay man, because we are gay and that's what we're known to do, right? And so you are completely defeated because you're like, hey, this is what I'm doing because I have to do this work, not because I enjoy it, because I have no other choice, right? Or you think at the time you have no other choice because no one's telling you any otherwise, and you're young and that's all you know. But when you do build up the courage to get out at a young age, you go to someone and say, hey, I'm doing this because I have nowhere to sleep at night. I need to take a shower, and this is the only way I can get these things done, how I can eat and how I can be cleansing and get some clothes. And they look at you like, hey, well, this is what you want to do, or it's a joke to them. And then you walk out of there and then you're like, well, what now?
And there's not a lot of other options, right?
Like no other options.
There's no other options. And so, this idea that my identity makes me happy to be exploited is insane. That is ridiculous. That is a ridiculous imposition to make on two children, right? Like we see, like I can tell you how many times I was in plain public sight and view with men significantly older than me. Significantly.
I actually was with a guy from 14 to 15, and he was like 38 years old. And I look young now, and I looked young, way younger then. And I would be out in public with this man, and he would be touching me and doing other things to me, and no one would give a shit, No. And it had it been a woman who was in that situation, people would be like, what the hell's going on? Like, what is that about? And so when it's me and I'm a young gay black man, or a young gay man in general, they're like, that's okay. They're men, the boy, this is what he wants, he's a gay man. That's what he prefers, an older man who's exploiting me, little do they know, and giving me drugs and telling me, hey, go do this for this amount of money, and then come back to me and give me half of that. And now you look, and that's what they see. That's what they see in you.
Oh my God, 100% believe in that. And I know we have a lot of other questions though, so I'm gonna pause around.
Absolutely. That's so powerful. And I think if there's anyone watching today that's had a similar experience, Erik, I think it'd be powerful to hear, what would you say to a younger version of yourself?
I think I would tell myself that that you're loved, that you're going to survive this, that one day your pain will be seen and heard, and that you will self-actualize your own justice, and that power lies in you. Because I think I needed to hear those things. I didn't understand, I felt like what I had been through, someone had hurt me when I was younger as well, someone close to me. And so I've been conditioned my entire life to feel like that was what my body was made for. And I didn't have boundaries around that because I was never taught boundaries around that. And I think that if younger me could be instilled with any sense of wisdom, it would be the wisdom to survive that and to do that with less pain.
I think I would tell myself to, like Erik said, love yourself, right? A lot of the time I did not love myself. I hated everything about myself, right? And I picked myself apart, and I thought that I deserved this, right? And I think I would tell my younger self, like, hey, hang in there. You got this. There's no one to help you now, but you can help yourself, right? As much as you possibly can, believe in yourself. You can help yourself by believing in yourself and believing that you deserve more and deserve better. Telling myself that I'm a Black young king and I am destined for great things, just to validate myself at every waking moment, and tell myself that I'm beautiful, that I'm worth it, and that I'm worth more than just that. I was looking for validation so much, you know, 'cause as a kid, you're looking for validation from your parents, and we don't get that. You look at it from your peers. We don't get that. You look at it at other outside sources, and then that becomes dangerous and toxic. And I would tell myself, don't look for that. You have it already in yourself. Believe in yourself. And that would have made such a big difference to me.
That was my vulnerability too. You know, the reason why I was online, even seeking out the interactions that led me maybe vulnerable to trafficking, was because I needed those affirmations. Because I didn't see any reflection of myself and my identity around me. And I didn't have any affirmation or a way of exploring what that meant. Like many children at 14, we're putting on these, we're seeing where we fit in the world, you know? We are exploring our identities. I think oftentimes at 14, one of the most important identities is your sexual identity. And every child goes through that as part of our development. And so when we talk about those vulnerabilities, I think especially in 2021, when everything's online, we have to think about how our youth are vulnerable through that exploitation there. I mean, if I had someone to talk to who was safe and affirming and loved me, and I knew I could just be open with, I don't believe I would have had that experience. I believe that the questions I had about my life would have been answered in a safe environment. I believe that if someone believed what happened to me as a child before the trafficking, that I wouldn't be in that situation, even with that hook-ring occurred. And I believe if we believe survivors, we can see this world really turn around.
And also, you know, I didn't even want to tell anybody what happened to me. That's how afraid I was of being judged. Like I told no one for years because I was like, who would believe me anyway? You know,
how do you even describe it?
Right. How do you say it? How do you say that? And how do you describe it without feeling like you're a piece of crap, you know? And I was sort of looking down at you like, oh my God, you know, like how do you there's no way to do it. And so you bottle all of that in, and it just gets worse and worse. And you dig your personality, you dig your mental health in a deeper hole. And so when you want ready to get out, it's so much harder to do so. And you have to put yourself so hard because you held so much in for so long because you had no one there.
Can I say I remember when I first heard a survivor speak on survivorship. Mind blown. It was actually at a support group at Rest, and I'm so thankful. That was like such a moment, a divine moment, because without that moment, I wouldn't be here being able to speak these words to you today. And in that support group, I happened to be vetted through to this agency that at the time only served women. I was probably one of 3 men to walk through the front doors into the drop-in center. And if I didn't meet her that day, if I didn't hear her talk about her pain without shame, I wouldn't be alive today. I'd be in prison or I'd be dead. I can 100% guarantee you that. And so we need each other. We need to hear our voices. I need to hear Viserys speak these words from the highest levels and platforms. I need to hear my brothers, sisters, and siblings thriving so that the people who are being exploited now, the people who have it all bottled inside now, regards to the time from exploitation to now, can be well and heal. And the more diverse those voices are, the more reflective they are of the people experiencing those pains and traumas, the more healing that our communities will be able to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know when I first got out, you know, and I didn't even know that I was a trafficking victim initially, you know, and so when I talked about it, it was like I was a bad kid or, you know, did something I shouldn't have done. So it was the same for me, Erik, such a learning experience. Even just listening to the first survivor speak, it was so empowering. But I have a question to kind of follow that. What are some of the pivot points that we overlook or mischaracterize with young boys that have been trafficked?
Education, K through 12, healthcare, and social services, and in our juvenile justice system. So I can break that down a little bit, right? Like for me, in my education system in Washington State, we have something called Becca Bill. When you miss so many instances of your class, you are you're required, like legally required or mandated to attend school, and then there's all these consequences that happen if you don't. And I had missed like 70% of most school days, and I had come in with a note. They had binders this big, I think 2 of them, full of all the notes I had written, and there was never once someone who reached out to my parents. They also didn't put me on Becca Bill. I don't know why they didn't want to deal with me or not, but I was just, yeah, like that would have been a great point of intervention.
Yeah.
Because I went from being an honors student. I had scored in the top 2% of testing with the DIA schools, Department of Defense Education Administration schools overseas. I had been raised in a school system where I was 5 years ahead of any school in the state, so that my parents could be internationally deployable. And so I had went from being wicked smart and engaged to totally disengaged, not attending school, failing all my classes. And I mean, it was just such a distinction. I can't believe no one saw that or even asked questions related to other things, you know.
And to piggyback off that, sorry, to piggyback off that, I actually missed the entire 7th grade and 8th grade.
Wow.
I missed the entire 7th and 8th grade. When I got arrested as a kid for prostitution, for being for loitering in the Village in New York on Christopher Street, they took the juvenile detention center and they took me up there in front of a judge, and I got placed into a foster home. And I had missed 7th and 8th grade, and they tried to put me in 8th grade. They bumped me up to 9th grade without any problem, without any testing. They just bumped me up to 9th grade. But I was a chronic runaway, and no one asked why. What were you doing? I was just immediately arrested and criminalized for being on the corner. And I wasn't even probably doing anything that day. I just remember being on the corner, being arrested, and no one asked any of those questions. Just like put me in a juvenile detention center and put me in foster care, and that was just the end of it.
Absolutely, that resonates for me, like talking about earlier how that law enforcement officer had left me with a trick on side of the road in the middle of the night. And touch on some of those other points too with our different systems. I said education, healthcare, social services, juvenile justice. I had been brought before a judge. So I went to healthcare because I'm just going to get really personal right now, okay? I had a STD overgrowth in the rectal area of my body at 14 that was causing some major health problems for me, as well as some physical trauma to my rear area due to some physical violence and sexual violence that occurred during my trafficking experience. And being characterized as that overly promiscuous young man obfuscated that violence. It became my fault, right? And so this internalizing of it's your fault is what I think diminished me even more in other systems. That same healthcare provider, she actually broke the law reaching out to my family and disclosing health information against HIPAA in Washington State at 14. You are in control of your own healthcare. And so they dispatched social workers to my house who did not find any problem. I was this well-spoken, intelligent kid, and but they referred me over to an at-risk youth program in Washington where you're court mandated by the juvenile judge to follow any instructions of your parent or guardian. If they told me to stand on my head and come down the stairs, that if I didn't do it, that would be a violation. And that judge cared about me. That doctor cared about me. That social worker cared about me. But they didn't see me. They didn't see what was occurring with me. They didn't see what happened to me. They in no way addressed the exploitation, trafficking, involvement in the sex trade in any capacity. And so I was skipped over by each of these systems. I was put in crisis response centers. No wonder everything happened after it happened, because it was almost like every filter we have to help our children just scanned right over me. And that became my experience. And that's what I embodied, and that continued to be my experience.
Yeah, thank you for getting so personal, Erik. I know I had an experience in the healthcare system. I was in Las Vegas and I had been ran over by an SUV, and I woke up from being, blacked out, put under in the emergency room. And the nurse was in there with the police officer, and I woke up to hear them discussing that I was just a prostitute and I had been out on the track, and the police officer was going to take no report, so there was nothing filed. The nurse just looked at me with disgust. They wrapped up my foot and told me to have a good day. I left the ER with nowhere to go, left in a cab, and had to get myself to whatever hotel I was going to be going to. So, there's just, there was so much lack of education within that. And even just getting out of those kind of situations, we have so many barriers, so many more for men too, and young boys. What are some of the barriers of people exiting the life?
Rehabilitation is one of the main ones. Services, right? The lack of services. That's probably the one and main, well, not the one, but the main reason, the main barrier is there are just no services. There's not enough of people like me and Erik out there, right? There's not enough of us, advocating. There's not enough of places that offer these services, even though by law they have to offer these services. There's just not a lot of word of mouth, right? And even if programs do offer services for men, they don't advertise it, and so no one knows, right? And so as a young man, if you're trying to get out of the life, and you say you've had enough, and you've never had a job, you've never had a stable place to stay, where do you go? And so you're stuck in that same kind of situation, like a kind of a whirlpool of the same thing over and over and over and over again. But every time you have a thought to leave, you get ready to leave, you pack your bags, and you get out your house, and you're like, well, where am I going to go? And your house being a sex trade. And there's no one to go to, there's no one to talk to. And even if there is, like I said, there's no advertisement, it's not known. No one knows about it. And so we need to change that. We need to offer services. We need to offer faces to these services that are being provided. And we need to force it down people's throats, because they need to know that they have to help us. We're dead to. We're almost dead in this world. And we need to be relived.
I believe that 100%. No, I think, I don't know if I have just like this thought out answer for that, but I can just talk about, for me, I'm talking something really personal here, but I contracted HIV, and that, and I didn't have an easy case of HIV. My HIV quickly progressed into AIDS, and I had a CD4 count around 100, which normal persons is typically over 1,000. And I mean, the grass was making me sick, and I, by the grace of God, survived. And, I had this whole side of my head here was pus. My skin had been coming off, and, I couldn't eat an orange. It took me an hour to eat an orange. I would throw it up. I would collapse every day on my way to the kitchen to get my morning cup of coffee to lay down and get up again in 20 minutes. I mean, it was really hard. The only reason I endured that was because there was HIV services available. And I had a case manager who built a relationship with me, who understood what was happening in my life and where I'd come from, and had built a framework of transition for me that included rent assistance, that included, reconnecting with my academic pursuits, reconnecting with my professional pursuits. And I think without her in my life, I wouldn't have survived. I wouldn't have had any guidance whatsoever. I wouldn't be able to make the phone calls to the people I've been sexually active with. I wouldn't be able to sit with what I was going to do next because of how I had been making money. I wasn't able to sit with any of it. She put food in my fridge. She paid my rent, and she took me to the hospital when I wouldn't get out of bed. And we need that. Everyone deserves that who's been trafficked. You don't understand how lonely it is. You don't understand what it's like to sit in those hotel rooms and know what's coming next and know you don't want it. You don't get it. And I'm here to share with you right now. It hurts. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. It's oftentimes I wonder what I'm doing here. Why am I even alive? Because my friends are dead. They're murdered. They're missing. They're just not here anymore. I can't tell you how much they didn't deserve that, and how I wish it could have been me instead. But it's not. And I'm here, and I've been put here in front of you for a reason. I believe in these words that I speak. I believe in the words that you hear. I believe in each and every one of you listening right now to prevent this from happening to the next generation. And it's together that we're going to do this.
I love you, Erik.
I love you too. Man, Erik, I have known you for the past, 3+ years, and I'm so glad you're here. The impact you have left on, the anti-trafficking community, the policies you've pushed, the groups of people that you've made listen to you has been just so inspiring, and it's not just talk and we moved some policies, you're changing lives. So thank you so much for the work you both do.
And you're also an inspiration to me because I'm just starting in this. I mean, I've been doing some kind of volunteer work and a little bit of outreach for a long time, but I'm just starting to get into this work for our people and for our young men now. And so you've helped put me on to this work, and I appreciate you so much for that. And thank you for passing the baton to me so that I can teach someone else and pass the baton to them and keep that going and so on and so forth. So I love you.
I love you too, Frank. And it's mutual. You inspire me. We pour into each other, right? Like together we know so much.
Let's see. We do have an audience question here. So this wisdom is so appreciated. Thank you, they say. How do we get communities to see teen boys and trans youth as potential victims the same way they are starting to for girls?
I believe if we had the answer to that question, that we would be doing it. I know I would be doing it. But we don't have the metrics that we use for girls, for trans women, trans girls, trans boys, non-binary, and boys and men. For instance, in Seattle, we use a lot of the numbers from criminal justice numbers that are referrals from in the past have been referrals from law enforcement into social services. And so those numbers are highly dependent upon a law enforcement lens. And I'm not blaming this on law enforcement in any way. I'm saying that the system is complex and hasn't been built for an equitable response. And I think that's an assumption that we make. And so when we look at our numbers, they're not that way. Also, when we look at how we organize stings across the state, those are done almost without any attention to equity. And so there's not necessarily intentional efforts to highlight in our law enforcement investigations and like how trafficking occurs across all demographics. So that's a problem, right? Because that's what many of us depend upon to inform our realities, to inform our policy decisions, how we vote, etc. In addition to that, other places where we get metrics, like in healthcare settings or just different places, it's not measured anywhere. And the screening tools that we use in our local juvenile detentions were created for screening cisgender girls, and they were trained to screen cisgender girls. So there's no training or tools offered that are also equitable, inclusive, that we use to measure these things. And the good news to that's a solvable problem. And I think when we have some of those metrics, like the amazing tool from Seattle Against Slavery that looks to online activity for soliciting sex and advertising, that we're able to inform the dialogue and be able to actually answer that question.
Can we also just normalize that anyone can be a victim nowadays? Can that be a thing? Can we also does it have to be such a hard way to, a hard training on, hey, well, I'm a young man and she's a young woman. Well, how do you know that she's more trafficked than I'm trafficked? Why can't we just both be equally reported in the same way? Why can't we just both get equal amount of empathy and attention that we need?
Absolutely. And today is a good start. Just having this conversation. So important. And we're nearing the end, and I just want to end with this one last question. How would you like to be remembered, and what impact do you want to leave on your community moving forward?
I want to be remembered as a fighter. I want to be remembered as someone who came from this and made it back, right? I want to be remembered as someone who helped a mass of a community that wasn't being helped before, or that put a face to it. I want to be remembered as, he helped me. Whether it was a conversation, whether you just come into the drop-in at Rest Tuesdays and Thursdays and say, I need to talk to somebody, and I was there for you to talk to. And even if I couldn't provide you all the services that you needed, I was able to help you get the services that you needed from someone else, right? But that initial reaction that you had was talking to me, and it made you feel so much better about yourself. I want to be able to say that he helped me love myself by him showing me his story and what he'd been through and how he overcame that. I want to be remembered as someone who validated everyone for everything that they've been through, and that's my biggest goal, is to make sure that everyone feels loved, because we all are loved and we all are here for a reason. We're here by the same God. And I want to be remembered as the person who shared a story and made an impact on my life, on anyone's life, by providing services or providing help, or just giving me confidence to move on with my life, whether it was move on from that day or the day after that, or however. I want someone to say, you know what, you helped me love myself more. You helped me move on. And if one person says that to me, then I've made an impact in my community.
I want to be remembered as an ancestor. I want to be remembered as a leader who gave power to so many without taking power away from any. I want to be remembered as an ancestor, means that I want to be remembered by the legacy of those I have poured into. I want to be remembered by not knowing my name necessarily, but being familiar with my work in your spirit, being uplifted by the work that I have poured into others. And that's how I want to be remembered, humbly. I want to be remembered when in 50 years or how many years from now, someone can call the police or reach out to a pastor or a teacher, and something will happen, something will stop. That's how I want to be remembered.
Absolutely. That it will. Speak it into existence. All right. Well, we are wrapping up. And if anyone has any further questions, feel free to email me at rebekah@bestalliance.com. And I can also reach out to our speakers if you have any further questions to ask them as well. Thank you for attending today. Thank you to our speakers, Erik and Viserys. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you for having us. Ciao.